It's fabulous today to be joined by Tor and Phil to have a conversation with me about wisdom, which is one of the 6 aspirations in my new book, Leading Beyond Sustainability. And in the book, I provide a brief personal encounter with a number of people, but including Tor and Phil, and specifically on the subject of wisdom. Now, I know that both of you, Tor and Phil, would be reticent to describe yourselves as wise, but I think of you both as being 2 of the wisest people that I know in my life, that I have met. And so what I'd love to hear, maybe starting with you first, Tor, is just a little bit of your life story, just at headline level, to indicate how you've developed the way you have done, and right up to the sorts of things that you're doing today, what it is that excites you and what you're interested in, and maybe even your plans for the future. So we'll just treat it as an open conversation. So Phil might chip in, I might chip in. Let's just see where it goes.
Wonderful. Do we have 2 hours or was it 3 hours? I was not sure.
It's as long as it takes.
No, I, it's an interesting question, and then also a question that I may not have the answer, but I have some thoughts, and it brings up some thoughts in my head, and also feelings to be able to answer that question. What made me who I am? It's a complex one. I think that part of the main, a lot of things are happening when you are young, when you are very young, so to speak. And so your family condition is having a huge impact. And I was growing up with 3 brothers and 2 lovely parents who loved us dearly, but also didn't treat us separately, so to speak. No favorism or anything like that was in our family. Something that we didn't recognize at the time, but by looking back, that was the case. And I think that had a profound kind of foundation. But the other thing that is typical for me is that I also had I had a bad temper, and I was also, I think that is connected to the fact that I was not very present because I was also hyper, what do you call it? Hyper, yeah, hyper. It's the way on how you say it in English. Had a lot of energy, and even to the extent when I was really small that I was caged by my father in my bed so that I didn't wake everybody up. And looking back at that, it has not changed me to or shaped me in any way of in a bad way that I have any things that are happening to me because of that. But it's more of knowing that that was not giving me the possibility to be present. And when I'm not present, I'm not able then to take in what's going on, and that made me struggle in school. And now I think we get into the reason why I don't feel that I'm wise, because I was taught by the grades and also the teachers and exams that you have. I was not really smart as everybody else, but it was later that I realized it was actually not my lack of presence that was making me not being able to capture and understand what was going on. Later on in life, to make it that story shorter, it became obvious that I did have the same intelligence and capabilities and possibilities as anybody else as long as I was present, which is bringing me back to this regarding wisdom as well. I mean, wisdom to me is very much connected to being present, being able to be in the here and now, and also govern your own kind of thoughts and feelings. I would say even you're able to be fully present. It's a prerequisite, in my point of view, in order to be wise. So those are 2 things that I think that has shaped me. The other thing is that I wouldn't maybe have come to this conclusion unless I was actually being able to be with others, my brothers, of course, but also my friends. And I was an exchange student for a year in the United States, and I had a sister who was very similar to me, and she helped me realize that that's not the type of person I would like to be. So I mean, so she had bad temper, and she was beautiful. I mean, she was the prom queen, and I mean, she was highly regarded in school. But when we rode to school together in the car, she was, and excuse my language now, she was a bitch. She was really a bad person. And then she came in and flipped. And to me, that is very, it's not honest. So she taught me a lot of things. And I think that a lot of people that has created the wisdom that people see in me, that might see in me, is actually coming from the fact that I have seen what I don't want to have. I don't want to see that, and I want to be somebody who is much more true, present, honest, and that's what I've been focusing on very much for a long time, since I mean since my youth and then throughout my working hours. However, though, this fear of not being good enough has haunted me through my life, and it has shown up in a way that even if I got good grades finally, because I kind of woke up from my belief that I was not good enough, and being able to get some good grades from the university and get a job. But I did still have that belief, that image of myself of not being good enough. So I worked really long hours because I was afraid of not being. I even thought at some point they may even catch me that I'm not as smart as they think I am, or something like that. That kind of inner demon that was there. And it was not until later, and I think very much due to the work that I've been privileged to working with human development, and then that led me into to meet Phil and work with the Barrett Valley Center and Richard's work of how our motivation and needs are changing in our lifetime. Understanding myself through that framework has been very helpful, and it's not only that one, but I mean the journey around that work has helped me. And so I would say that my groundedness, if that is the right word to say, and coming to ease and more in inner peace, so to speak, with my fears, so to speak, has come through the realization of working with these things. And it has happened more like I'm 45, 50 years old. So I'm 63 right now. So it's quite recent that I actually come to ease with that.
And just for the benefit of people that may be watching, Tor, the Richard you refer to is Richard Barrett, of course, who founded the Barrett Values Centre. And of course, your work with them has taken you on some pretty deep journeys with all sorts of people, either practitioners learning the method and clients benefiting from the method. And I guess that's probably kind of forced you, because I'm also a Barrett practitioner, and I know it forces you to understand yourself better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it forces you to understand yourself better. But the other way, and I agree with that, but I would also put up that it creates a language for you to address and get closer to the framework. I mean, it's based on Maslow and the Vedic system. It's a brilliant simplification or a description of what's really I would call human wisdom rather than it's Richard Barrett's wisdom. I think that he has done an excellent job. What he has done that I think is unique is that he's actually connected values, which is the description of our needs, to those levels of that model, which makes it possible for you to be able to understand yourself on a deeper level.
Yes.
And it's not the model in itself or the language that I got, it's the conversation and the work that has been able to be done, the conversation that is coming from this work that is has shaped me to be able to understand myself as well. So I would say I wouldn't be able to be who I am if I wouldn't be working with somebody or having the opportunity to work and collaborate with others.
Yes, yes. And of course, now you're working with Phil at Amcara. And one of the things that really inspires me is the mission of Amcara as described on your website, about making the world a healthier, better place. I wonder if you could just say a little bit about why that or how that inspires you, and what your thoughts are about what the world needs.
Yeah, partly you could say it would be interesting to hear what Phil is saying as well. I mean, we talk quite a lot about these type of questions, but and we have our ways to describe it, and it's also it's emerging process to understand that. But I would probably start with the name in itself, which is Gaelic. It's coming from it has a Gaelic Old English tradition or origin, which is actually coming from the word Anamcara. Anam being soul and Kara being friend. And if you ask me what the word needs, is more of soul friend relationships. And what kind of relationship is that? Is when you are able to be completely free, or at least aware of your fears, and having courage to stand up and do that anyway, and you're able to share that with somebody that is very close to you. And the more you have those type of relationship with each other, the quicker you can actually move from where you are today to where we need to go, so to speak. So Amcara or Amcara, which is the shortening of that, is actually describing what I think that the world is needing: more of honest, trustworthy, close relationships, because we won't be able to solve this alone. This take on, let's put it like this, take on the challenge that we are faced with in the world, unless we are working together. And that's why our mission, purpose, is to try to be and work to become or be a beacon for a more sustainable world today, tomorrow, together. Those three words are very important, because we can start doing it already today. I mean, the decisions I take as a person every day has an impact. I can do things that then has an impact for the generations to come. And we both have that purpose in our life, is to create a world for our children. That is part of why we are doing what we're doing, to make sure that they also can benefit and live on this earth, so to speak, and thrive in their views and their world. But the last word, together, is also very important, because we become stronger when we are open to be influenced, and we are thinking of how we actually could collaborate or find solutions that just not one person. Nobody's perfect, but a team can be, or a group can be, and that's how I would say was driving me. Phil,
I'd like to connect the dots, actually, because we're on this interview with Clive and his amazing new framework for what comes after the SDGs and leading beyond sustainability. And the obvious connection of Amcara, soul friend, would be the word connection. And I'm just reading from Clive's words here. So that's about collaboration, compassion, love, and wisdom. And my goodness, this very small entity, which is Amcara, is at the moment internally just Tor and I, but we collaborate with so many other amazing beings. But then I was just considering what's my experience of working in this with other people, and it is the closest expression to all of these six conditions. So peace and abundance and vitality and wisdom and opportunity. I've never experienced the richness of those six words or conditions so incredibly as I am right now. And that's not just because of Tor and I, it's because we're working within this, I used the phrase earlier, this hollow movement, this movement of healing of humanity and creating well-being on planet Earth, that most people don't know they're in it right now, but we are,
Exactly.
and we're very consciously in it. And so until Tor was describing that just now, and then I was also looking at your six conditions, it's like, actually, this fits together so perfectly, and I can see this all together, and I feel very privileged. I recognize that I am, Tor is, I think you are too. We're in a very privileged position where we have that opportunity to experience all those things is right in front of us right now. It is our lived reality at the moment. There are, for many people on planet Earth, that's a more challenging situation, either because they can't see it for themselves, or their lived reality is that they're in a war zone, or they're being flooded, or they can't breathe because of wildfires, and that makes a lot of that stuff more challenging.
Yeah, could
Wow.
I just build upon a dimension in what you are saying is that if you think about what do we as human beings have our attention on? We have our attention on what could harm us, what are the things that are wrong, that are threats and so on. And it's natural because that's how we survive in the environment that we are part of. And even if there's a lot of positive things happening, which there is, and we see that, and we meet people who are really believing and really making a true difference, so to speak. Still, a lot of the news, still a lot of the communication going on is that, oh, we are in such a crisis. And I'm not saying things are going wrong. There are things going wrong, but there's a lot of things that we miss that is actually happening that is very positive. And we are blinded then by the things that are being threats, if I use that as well.
Yes.
And to me, that is an important thing to think about. Focus on the things going right rather than focus on the things that are wrong.
Yes. That was the whole essence behind the book, that because sustainability is powerful and necessary, and I can see the Sustainable Development Goals on the wall behind Phil. There they are. And part of the analysis that I did, because of course I spent about 8 years promoting the Sustainable Development Goals and writing the book Designing the Purposeful World, which is all about them. And I really wanted to do exactly as you suggested, Tor, and that's to describe the world that we'd all like to have, the world that would delight us. And the more I've gone into this, the more I've discovered that that world is actually happening. And I've been encouraged by people like, for example, Steven Pinker with his book Rationality, which he encourages us to look at the data to see how the world is changing and by and large improving. And then also people like Adam Dorr from Rethink X and Tony Sieber, who have actually described and compiled the trends and the data to show that actually we're heading to a really special place. So it's encouraging that you're helping people to really take stock of the contribution they're making and to do the work that's necessary to bring it into the world. I wonder if I could sort of also take you up on your offer, Tor, to maybe pass over to Phil and hear a little bit about his story. Phil, would you be happy to say a little bit about what has made you the man you are now?
Yeah, I'm very curious to hear that story.
So you've heard it 4 million times already.
And I enjoy it every time.
Okay, I'm gonna start at maybe a slightly different place, and that's a belief I have that I have no proof of, and I'm not gonna suggest that anybody else needs to believe this, but my belief is that we as souls come here to planet Earth to learn about love, because in this dimension of existence we have duality. We have light and dark and good and bad and white and black and all those sort of things, and love and fear is another dimension that exists here. And so in this place, in order to what I've experienced in my life is that in order to learn about love, one of the most powerful lessons is to experience and discover what love isn't. And I now recognize the patterns in my life that have enabled me to go to as far as I've gone, very, very far on those scales. So when I was born, my parents were running children's homes. I had, between the age of 0 and 14, I had 350 foster brothers and sisters. And So there was usually about 20 children in the house at any time, and my mum and dad were the most incredible models of loving and compassion and all those things you've written here in the connection, love and kindness and compassion. And that by the way, they weren't perfect. They had all their own stuff. My dad struggled for some time as an alcoholic before he became a a Church of England priest, and all sorts of weird things that they were doing as well. But so what I saw through my childhood was a lot of suffering, particularly children from broken homes, but also people that were coming to live with us who had come out of prison or from mental hospital, or people that were in really desperate need and suffering. And my parents were always opening their hearts and opening a very practical space in their home for people to come in and experience love and care and compassion and kindness. And I know that people, not that I'm in contact with many of those, but I've heard stories over the years of people who have been deeply touched by that, and it's gone on to affect that, certainly affected my life as well in a very deep way. So part of that, because I completely resonate with Tor's thing around having periods in my life of never feeling good enough, and like I'm not good enough and I can't really do that. But there was a time where when I became, I think about age 11 or 12, I became incredibly independent. Children's home life wasn't really working for me, and I would go off hitchhiking and go off by myself for a couple of days, and got to a point of independence where it's like, hey, I can do anything, and I can. That confidence grew within me, and I went on to enter the IT world and loved how technology connected human beings. And it wasn't until I don't know what age I was, but the year 2000, I clearly remember the opening of the new millennium, which was a transformation point in my life when I read Richard Barrett's book, Liberating the Corporate Soul. And although I held all these things in my heart, I had nothing in, like Tor said, there needs to be a language for this. It was just the first time that I had a language to describe what I held in my heart. And I very quickly changed out of my IT career into this field of human development and values and culture and consciousness. And I remember the very first training course I was on that Richard Barrett said, what is a value? And I thought, I have no idea. I don't know what a value. I have no idea how to describe that. And halfway through the first morning of the course, I stood up and I said, I'm not getting this. I shouldn't be here. And the other trainer said, sit down, get on with it. So I felt beyond me, like a field of human development in a sense of complexity that was beyond me. And I'm now, I still feel the same. Like the more that I understand this, where it comes to this thing about wisdom and truly not feeling wise, because the more I know and experience, the less I realize that I really know about myself and the world. And I have a discovery process that will, I imagine, not just this lifetime, but many lifetimes beyond, can continue in. And then the other part I say is that I thought I really had it all figured out. I was living a really joyful life. One of my nicknames was Tigger. I was just the model of enthusiasm and love and care and all those sort of things. And then around 2016, 2017, I went into a profound burnout. Went into a mental health crisis that was really bad. And now I have a sense of understanding for others who go through. It was only for me, it was theory before that. Now I have practical knowledge of what that means. And when I talk about experiencing the other end of love into the depth of fear, there was no sense of connection to self, connection to God, connection to light, connection to love, connection to creativity, spontaneity, nature, all of that was completely ripped away. And that now, as I'm coming through healing from that, realizing that in order to truly experience love, and at the other end of that scale, now knowing what it isn't is now allowing me to come back to that place and having some, I'll use the word, having some wisdom around that, actually, because I'm now able to work with others and share with others and support them in their journey. Not, by the way, it's another realization I have, that so much of the world is trying to run away from these dark feelings, and I'm sure there is still a legitimate medical reason for some of the medication, but I've experienced for myself now that you have to feel it to heal it. You have to go through that experience, and a lot of the medication suppresses that, so that stuff just gets pushed down further and further and further and stored within the cellular memory system of the body and doesn't release. And I know that I've been through a process of release, which is really painful. I could use a very strong expletive word to describe that, but I won't. But it's a very painful process. But that's what healing is about. And actually, if I now look at what's happening on planet Earth, maybe this isn't a crisis. Maybe this is a metamorphosis, which is really painful for humanity and governments and organizations. And but it's a necessary process of letting go and healing, that if we try to suppress it and hold on to the old, we're going to get stuck to the point of it's non-sustainable. It will fail. It will crash and burn. But if we allow ourselves to go through that metamorphosis, then there is the opportunity to find your conditions: peace, connection, abundance, vitality, wisdom, and opportunity. As we come through that healing process, all of that becomes not just possible, but inevitable.
Yes. Wow. That's so powerful, Phil. And what I'm feeling inclined to ask of you, Phil, and then maybe Tor as well, is your aspirations for the world. You know, where do you see us heading? Do you dare put yourself into that future, and what does it look like?
Okay, I don't know, and there's a sense in which I don't even need to know or want to know. It would feel a little bit arrogant even to say that I know that. I can have my dreams, I can have my wishes, maybe express that. I want to come back to the topic of this session, which is on wisdom. And so there's lots of different ways to think about wisdom, and I'll just share my one. What I'm experiencing is that as I go deeper into allowing the core of me to be exposed, rather than all these shields and fears and stuff. So as I get quieter through my breathing, through my meditation, through walking in nature, then what happens is that wisdom flows through and from me, and I don't need to do anything. Actually, it just is. It just happens. The more fearful I am, the more unpresent I am, the more worried or stressed I am, all of that gets suppressed, and it's unable to flow. Tor and I have both been facilitating on a particular very large workshop recently for a global electronics company, and in one of those sessions, I went into pure flow state. I had no idea what the next thing was coming through from my mouth, and it was just fun to be there and witness myself being in that space. And so I'm not always there. That's quite rare, actually, but that's a moment of experiencing wisdom. And um, and so I'm going to bring it down to finding, like, what does the future, what would my desired future be for me and for others? It would be finding that space of increased practices that bring peace, inner and outer, so that life just flows through us quite naturally. Because what
Wow.
the other side that I'm experiencing from that is that the more that I allow, or so it's, there is actually there's a working hard part in this. There has to be an aspect of practice, in my experience. So I have to take time to practice meditation, to practice breathing, to make time to talk about these things, to appreciate nature, whatever that is. So that's the hard work part, because there has to be a real dedication to doing that. But when, as I say, when that's true, then it flows, and then the universe responds. So what I'm experiencing right now, this word abundance, is like the universe is saying to me, here's this opportunity and here's this work, and and we've got another one for you. You might think it's a bit big, but we trust you can do this. And so those those conditions, the quieter I get within, the more those conditions reveal themselves.
I love what you said, Phil, about wisdom being something that flows through us, and that we create the conditions in which it can do that rather than something we have. It's a much more profound way of looking at it. And it kind of fits in with what you also said about love and consciousness,
Yeah.
that we're part of that bigger whole. And the wisdom is something that is in flow rather than something that is generated from within. We simply become conduits. What are you thinking, Tor?
Well, hang on a second, because I want to pick you up, Clive, on that, because I think you told me that when I said it flows through us, this was a few months ago, you said, well, don't forget that you are part of it as well. And so I think my words just now were both through us and from us, or through me and
Yes.
from me, to own that I am part of that
Ah,
as well. So recognizing the divine and recognizing that I'm part of that process as well.
yes. Gosh, I could have another hour's conversation on that subject alone. I can almost see the cogs turning in Tor's mind, if that's possible. And by the way, I ought to point out to anybody watching this that Tor is not driving. He's a passenger in a car and has
Yeah,
kindly made
this
it
is
possible to have this
this is
conversation
not in
today.
England, because that would be on this side. But
Yeah. So, Tor, I'd love to know what's going on in your mind. And I'd also like to do two things. I am conscious of both of your time, but I'd also like you to be thinking about, if there was one question, this had only just arisen, this wasn't planned in the slightest, but if there was one question that you've never asked of each other, what would it be? And I'd like you to ask that before we leave today on and around this subject of wisdom and inner development and so on. But Tor,
yeah, but coming back, I mean, I very much align with what Phil has described in a beautiful way. But what goes on in my mind, and you're right, a lot of things was going on in my mind, and like Phil, I don't feel that I have the answer, but I have some perspective, some thoughts around the question regarding what do we need. And I think that the biggest reason why we have the challenges we have or are facing today is the human ego.
mm,
Now, the problem with ego in itself is that we have a very negative quotation and relationship to ego. Oh, you're a big ego. You're only thinking about yourself. Well, my point is that I think that Phil is touching upon that, is of that inner, the love and fear side that we have to work with. I think a lot will happen if we're able to connect more to our fear side and embrace that, because that's helped us to be who we are, to become what we are doing. But the fear also has a very I would say, unknown or subconscious side. So we do a lot of things to meet those needs that the fear or the ego is calling for. And that's why we have some of the problems that are showing up in the world. So for me, it's more of that journey, exploration of why do I have these hesitations, whatever you would like to call it, because sometimes you can even not just talk about fear, but embrace your fears, learn to why you have those things, and then see, because that's why I think we're able to meet and coming more from a space of love. And I'm talking from my own experience. My fear held me back to be at my best. But when I'm starting to embrace my fear and have the courage to do things anyway, because that's what courage is to me, is doing it regardless if you are feeling the fear or hesitation or negative feelings around it. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Exploration around understanding your own inner, doesn't have to be traumas, but it are things that you think is the stories that you tell yourself in order to protect yourself from harm in any way outside. That's what the ego is helping you with. The other thing that comes to mind, which is a completely or something completely different, even if it's connected, is to understand that we develop in different seasons in our life. We are all in the, if I may say so, in the more later seasons of our life. And I would never be able to, I think, to be able to connect to the conversation we have if I were in my 20s.
Mm.
And I'm talking for myself. There are people who are, but we evolve in different stages as human beings. And in the beginning, we have to learn to adapt and fit into a certain system, or we believe that if we are going to be in this system, we have to do these things, and the parents and friends and so on has an influence on that. So we also have to be able to meet them, people who are not, knowing that it has to flow through you. It sounds very beautiful, and it is very beautiful, but also knowing that we have gone through a lot of, building our skills, getting the experience, doing all the things that had made faults or learnings, if we were, all those things made it possible for us to, in my case, that let go of my fear or let go of my attachment to my fear so that love can shine through. And that is a realization that it's very important for me to know that it's okay. I have these needs, I have these thoughts, these stories to protect me, but are they helping me? And when I'm saying me, I'm thinking of me in the bigger sense of me in the world, making this a place of well-being and flourishing, so to speak, not only for me but for people around me. That won't happen unless I'm able to meet my own ego that is governing me, so to speak.
Wow.
And become conscious about that. So it's more about become more self-aware, more conscious about what's driving your decisions and who are you and all those questions. And if I may then say that what Phil was talking about, he was talking about the journey that comes when you are starting to let go of those sides. And that's what Phil, why he can talk so beautiful about what you just said, Phil, because you wouldn't be able to do that when you were in 30s or so on. It's not an age thing, it's more of the life experience related thing, I think. So that's my view of
and what would you like to ask Phil that you've never asked him before in and around the topic of wisdom? Is there such a thing? I know you guys spend so much time together, so is there anything you've never asked him before?
Oh, we talked quite a lot, so
we finish each other's sentences even, so we're so connected.
Yeah. That's a downside of that as well. Yeah, why don't you start, Phil?
Well, it's interesting. I actually gonna ask a question that Tor taught me, because it then it opens a field of possibility. So, Tor, what's your most important question for you at the moment?
Yeah. Wow. Well, do we have to answer the question right now as well?
Yeah.
Because, well, to simply put, it is to to find the. I think we had a conversation about that this morning when we had a conversation. It's more of how do we reach out and create that inner flame, understanding, willingness, or enthusiasm and curiosity inside of people that we are working with to take on the necessary journey to be more, I would call, more present, more grounded in who they are, and inspiring others to be able to do that journey. That's the question. I don't have the answer to that because it's a quite complex issue, I think, or complex. It has so many facets. But that is the most important question. How can I make this big difference, so to speak, in the world so that our children can have a world to live in? That's probably
to make the work simple, accessible, inspiring, and invite people much more simply into it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
is what I think I heard.
Yeah, that's exactly, because I can't motivate anybody else, but I can inspire. I can take them to the place where they, well, I really would like to do that. And I think, Clive, that's the type of work that you're doing. You're inspiring people by the work that you do and the books that you write. I get very inspired when I'm reading your books because it puts some new perspective or perspectives that goes beyond what I talked about earlier, that, automatic, unconscious, fast reaction. What's the threat here? How do I, survive in this world?
Yeah, thank you, Tor.
I don't know what kind of question.
Simplicity is probably what it's all about, isn't it? It is, these are very deep questions, but sometimes the answers are really simple. And but they don't come unless you ask the questions.
Can I give you a real example of the simplicity? Because I was on a call the other day and we were talking about some of the depth of the kind of spiritual depth of consciousness. And I said, well, actually, there's a really, because all that's important to get to that point, but there's a really simple aspect to this as well. And that's just simply knowing something I didn't know yesterday and being able to act on that. And I talked about a leader that I'm coaching who had never thought to say thank you to his team. And he's now saying thank you to his team. And just seeing how they light up and the level of appreciation and recognition, it's like, oh, and they feel completely different about that. And they're now saying thank you to him as their boss, as their leader.
Yeah.
And so that is a new step in consciousness at such a simple, practical level.
Absolutely. It reminds me, Phil, of something you've heard me say several times, I suspect, which is every time we notice, encourage and celebrate somebody who's changing the world, whether it's a big thing or a little thing, we're changing the world, because it's that noticing and encouragement that makes all the difference. And I think that's what this book is all about. It's to, I'll be writing some case studies of just a few people, but the truth is, and I'll be challenging readers to do this, is to have a think about the people we all know, because everybody knows people who are changing the world. And sometimes those people are doing it in a kind of lonely way without recognition. And so just to be able to shine that spotlight on them, and if we all did that, I think we'd accelerate the process no end.
I agree 100%. My question to Phil.
I'm hoping it's the same one, because I have a really good answer.
Okay. Well, you might be able to tweak it in that way. What makes you jump out of bed and say, yes, another day of this? Oh, maybe it was too complicated.
No, it's not. It's not, but it does lead me into a state of reflection between being from aversion, like, oh, I want to do this because there is there is a lot of poverty, there is a lot of suffering, there is all those things, and that's half of it. And then there's the other half, which is the what do I go towards, and what are my dreams and desires, and I noticed when you asked me that question, I automatically went into the what am I trying to solve? What are the problems that we need to drive away from? Because that's I think you said, Tor, before, that there's part of us that is naturally inclined at looking at danger and trying to avert from danger. That's not the inspiring part, though. What makes me jump out of bed is actually this very simple word called love, and creating those conditions here, because when that's true, all of that other stuff works, as I think that between the three of us we're at the beginning of discovering, and that's how powerfully it works. I would like to weave in the little thing that I was thinking about, because for me there is something really important. It's related to this. It's the aversion and the attraction, because I noticed when I was talking about one of my big questions at the moment is this discipline and practice to go towards inner peace. And at the moment, I've become aware that I'm practicing because of this fear that I'm not good enough, and there's lots to fix, and there's lots to heal, and there's lots to be better. And so it's a practice to walk away from, rather than a practice of accepting that I'm already perfect as I am, and that in practicing I'm just creating more peace and more calm, rather than fixing the broken wrong, Phil. And so that is the tension that exists within inside of me, which I think is also a reflection of on planet Earth. Is like, are we trying to fix the planet because it's broken, or are we attracted? Are we moving towards what we truly want to build? And I think there's a recognition in the world. For example, I know there's a movement in the USA to have not a department for war, but a department for peace. Because when we focus on war, what do we get? We get war. When we have a department of peace, that's what we move towards. And so I am in exactly that same inner dynamic, and working to resolve that for myself, because as I resolve that for myself, it makes it much more possible for there to be a department for peace rather than a department for war out there somewhere as well.
I'd like to make a brief observation and comment, because when Tor asked the question about leaping out of bed, I was immediately taken back to something that you said, Phil, I think before we started the interview, talking about your day and how your day begins with practice and with meditation. And so there is this almost tension between this idea of leaping out of bed and getting into action, and actually, no, just taking time to settle and be present, which was another word that Tor used a lot in this conversation.
Yeah.
And so there is something about what inspires us, and there's also, for me, something about settling and allowing that flow to happen.
Yeah.
Oh gosh,
but
I do like talking with you guys.
But most mornings, so my leap out of bed in a gentle way would be to sit on the floor and do my writing meditation.
Yes.
With this little friend here. If you're listening, you can't see Oscar on the floor. Oscar, my dog, who sits in between. I sit cross-legged. He sits in between my legs, and so I can meditate. And he goes into a very peaceful place. So that is definitely a joy for me in the mornings.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you both for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I leave you in peace?
Oh, a lot. maybe by that saying, play, have fun, because it's also a very important part on this journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tor. Phil?
I'm good, thanks, Clive.
Well, thank you ever so much.
Very grateful.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and Tor, enjoy your journey, and
Thank you.
good luck with the road ahead in every
Okay.
Thank
sense.
you. Bye now.